Welcome, everyone, to Phillies Extra, the baseball show from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm your host, Scott Lauber, and I'm excited to be joined this week by Phillies hitting coach Kevin Long. The season is a week old, and already there's a lot to talk about. The Phillies won their first two series for the first time since 2021. Zach Wheeler continues to be great. Kyle Schwarber hits home runs regardless of whether he bats leadoff or cleanup. Edmundo Sosa has Rob Thompson wishing he could petition MLB to let the Phillies put a 10th player on the field. Oh, and the undefeated Dodgers are coming to town for a big weekend series in which the Phillies will get their first look at Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Roki Sasaki in the first two games at Citizens Bank Park. But all anybody seems to want to talk about are torpedo bats. So in case you somehow haven't heard, and I don't know how you could have missed it, here's the story. The Yankees hit 15 home runs in their first three games of the season. Now, never mind that they were playing the Brewers, who have a bunch of injuries that have left them without most of their best pitchers, or that the games were played at Yankee Stadium, undoubtedly a hitter-friendly ballpark. It turns out that 9 of those 15 homers were hit with bats that are manufactured in such a way that the barrel, or the fattest part of the bat, where the hardest contact is usually made, is closer to the label rather than the end. The bats are shaped like a bowling pin, or I guess you could say a torpedo, hence the nickname. The torpedo bat was invented by a guy named Aaron Leanhart, who went to MIT and taught physics at the University of Michigan before getting into baseball as a hitting analyst for the Yankees. He works now for the Miami Marlins. With strikeouts on the rise and hitters searching for ways to make more consistent contact against pitchers who throw harder than ever before, Leanhart thought about making changes to the bat, a tool that has gone largely unchanged throughout the long history of the sport. Now, these bats are totally legal based on MLB specifications, which stipulate that the barrel can be no larger than 2.61 inches in diameter, and the bat can be a maximum of 42 inches long. They aren't new either. Several hitters began using the torpedo bats last season, notably Giancarlo Stanton of the Yankees and Mets shortstop Francisco Lindor. But they didn't enter the mainstream until the Yankees' opening weekend homer barrage. Jazz Chisholm Jr., Anthony Volpe, Austin Wells, Cody Bellinger, and Paul Goldschmidt all went deep with torpedo bats, and on the Yes Network telecast, Yankees announcer Michael Kay pointed out the bat's unique shape and shared their origin story. Well, baseball's a copycat industry. Hitters on other teams took notice, and bat companies, especially Marucci Sports and Victus Sports, have been flooded with requests all week long. Victus, based in King of Prussia, even drove a shipment of torpedo bats down to Citizens Bank Park and delivered them in time for the Phillies home opener. Alec Boehm took one right out of the case, and he used it in the game. Bryson Stott, Brandon Marsh, and a few other players have tried them out in batting practice. As Marucci president Kurt Ainsworth said in multiple interviews this week, it's torpedo mania. So it has all prompted so many questions. Are torpedo bats an invention that's going to revolutionize hitting, or are they a fad? And how much difference do they make anyway? Did the Yankees hit all of those homers because of the shape of the barrel of their bats, or was it because the Brewers' pitching isn't at full strength and, frankly, not very good right now? I can't think of anybody better to talk with about all of this than Kevin Long, now in his 4th season with the Phillies and one of the most respected hitting coaches in the sport. And if you stick with us after the interview, I'll touch on a few Phillies-related topics from the first week of the season and wrap up the show with a viewer question in our Hit and Run segment. But now, without further ado, here's my sit-down with Kevin Long. Kevin Long, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for hopping on with us.
You got it, Scott. Looking forward to it.
So there are a lot of really good reasons to invite you as a guest on the show. Chief among them is that every time I have a conversation with you, I feel like I've learned something, usually a lot of some things. But I wanted to have you on this week in particular because the primary tool of your trade, the bat, is making news in a way that we didn't expect. At least I didn't. The Yankees, one of your former organizations, hit 15 home runs in 3 games to open the season against a Brewers pitching staff that, it should be noted, was pretty undermanned. And it turns out that 9 of those homers were hit with what's being called a torpedo bat. You coach hitting. It's your vocation. So let me start with this. Are we witnessing an invention that's going to kind of revolutionize how people hit a baseball? Or do you agree with Brewers manager Pat Murphy, who put it so well, I think, when he said, it ain't about the wand, it's about the magician?
Well, yeah, it's certainly, if you look at the back of the baseball card, those numbers are pretty much going to read the same. There's not going to be any magical potion put on one of these players. Good players are going to be good players. I think when you look up at the end of the year, these guys' numbers are going to be very similar to what they've been in the past. Does it give you a different option, and could it help a player and maybe get over a couple obstacles? Meaning, if a guy gets jammed a lot, does it move that barrel down and help him maybe get some more hits and give him a different option? Certainly, I think that's something that we can throw into the equation. But I really feel like we haven't seen enough of these bats. I can't make a very educated decision as to how it's going to affect our game, but I kind of like it. I like to talk. It's certainly given baseball some hype, and a lot of people are talking about it.
Yeah, so let me go back. The more we learn about this, the more we find out. Like, I was talking to Bryson Stott the other day, and he said, look, this isn't new. We've known that these exist, and a lot of us have swung these. He told me that he went to the Marucci headquarters in Baton Rouge and took some swings to sort of see, whether it was for him based on where he tends to hit the ball. I know a lot of guys have done similar things. When did you first kind of become aware of this technology? I mean, I think Lindor used it last year. There were a lot of hitters that used it. Lindor might have hit that homer in the postseason with a torpedo bat, for all we know, against you guys in Game 4. When did you kind of become aware of it, and how familiar are you with it?
Well, I know it's been around for a while. It's just there hasn't been many people that have taken to it. And just the other day, Bryce Harper had a torpedo bat, and he was using it before the game, just in case he may use it. But I don't know. He put it down after 5 swings and really didn't like the feel he was getting. So I think that was more the case than anything else, is that these players were trying it and didn't necessarily like the feel they were getting with it. Now with all this craze coming out and the Yankees hitting all these home runs, it seems like it's gaining some steam, and guys are willing to try it and give it maybe a better opportunity to see if it can really help them.
Yeah, like as Bryson said to me, it's not for everybody. Maybe if you're the kind of guy who gets jammed a lot or tends to hit the ball closer to the label more often, maybe you want to give it a try. If you hit the ball off the end of the bat, you probably want the traditional barrel because you want the fat part of the bat in the traditional spot. Is that kind of where you're at with it? Is just sort of individual guys trying to figure it out? Because then you have other guys like Alec Boehm who said, hey, why wouldn't you want to try it? Like, look what the Yankees just did. And he had, Victus come over, and Victus dropped off a bunch of bats, and he used a few in the home opener the other day. And afterwards we said, you're going to use it again? And he said, I don't know. I didn't hit a home run with it, so maybe not. I think he was kidding a little bit. Like, I think he's going to give it more of a chance, but I don't know. I mean, what's your advice to guys as far as like bringing it into a game and using it and giving it a try?
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said like an Alec Boehm, who tends to hit the ball deeper and tends to hit it down near the label more than he does off the end of the bat. I think it would benefit somebody like him. Harper hits balls off the end of the bat a lot more than he does near the label. So I don't know if that's going to benefit him as much. Bryson Stott's a little bit of both. We do have data that can support, certain players using it and certain players not. We're meeting with the company that designed the bats next week, and we're going to have our front office there. We're going to do a Zoom call, and everybody's going to be involved, and we'll kind of get a better understanding of the whole science behind it, and see if it's something that we can exploit and use to our benefit and help some of our players. And it's going to be an individual basis. It's going to be something that we look into deeply as far as where they consistently hit the ball as according to their bat, and then we'll just take it from there. But it's interesting that there's maybe a tool out there that can help some of these guys.
Kurt Ainsworth, the president of Marucci Sports, a former pitcher, by the way, he suggested that
I played against him. So
I know you did. How'd you do against him?
He was a first rounder with the Giants. I know that. I faced him. I don't know. I don't remember getting eaten up. I don't remember doing anything special. So it was probably a wash.
On an Olympic team, so he was a guy who I know was definitely touted as a pitcher, and he suggested that baseball could become like golf, right, where hitters have different bats in their bag for different situations. Maybe you tend to hit a particular pitcher differently than pitcher X differently than pitcher Y or whatever, given how they match up against you. With all we know now and all the data and the BPI and all the things that these guys get measured for, either on their own or with you guys, is that something that you think, does that make sense to you that it would become like golf where you'd have X number of bats in your bag and pick the one that suits the situation best?
Well, I think you have to make some sense of this, and I think there has to be some kind of understanding on why you're using a certain bat against a certain pitcher. Guys make adjustments all the time. They may use a heavier bat against somebody. They may use a lighter bat against somebody. They may back off the plate. They may get closer. They may do a 2-strike approach. They may do a leg kick. There's so many different avenues that these guys can go to. You don't really talk about the tool, though, the bat. How many times does a guy go in with a different bat? Not a whole lot. Unless you're like Yoenis Cespedes, who I had, and he'd hit a home run with a certain bat, and then the next at bat he'd use a different one. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "It's not the arrow, it's the Indian." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Interesting," but that was his psyche behind it, meaning that it's kind of what Pat Murphy said. I think it's more the person swinging the bat than the actual bat itself. So we'll see where this ends up going, but it's certainly interesting and fascinating in a lot of ways.
Why do you think it is, right? Hitters have been facing pitchers in major league games for a really long time, and so much has changed about the sport. The glove has changed over the years. The ball changes, right, all the time. Why do you think it is that the tool that the hitter uses, the bat, has remained, maybe there have been subtle changes that we don't, on the outside, don't recognize as much as you guys do, who are doing it every day. But why do you think the bat, for the most part, by and large, has remained the same?
They have made changes to it. The wood is so much better. It's harder. I remember when I was playing, you would take one swing, hit a ball, and it would literally dent your barrel. You could see where you actually hit the ball, and now you can't even tell where these guys are hitting it. The wood is just much better wood, much stronger wood. So I think that part of it has changed. Now doing, the technology now with the torpedo bat, that's a whole different level. That's, you're taking literally the biggest part of the bat and you're moving it, which that's the fascinating part about this whole thing.
And it's legal. We should mention that,
yes.
As long as the diameter, the diameter of the bat is that, it remains the same by Major League Baseball specs. This is legal. You can do it. But, do you worry that we get into a situation where, people have compared it to the tush push, right, in the NFL, and one team's gotten really good at doing that, and now a lot of other teams are saying we should make this illegal. Do you worry that some teams are going to get better at this than others, or that, baseball is going to have to step in and say we need to level the playing field, so to speak? I know we're only at the beginning of this, really starting to talk about it and the effects of it, but, do you have any concerns that it could kind of get a little out of control?
No, I really don't. And, there's going to be opportunity for every individual player, every organization to kind of look into this and explore it. But, it could be the same advantage for every single team if they wanted to use it. And again, Scott, we're talking about, different guys using it. There's going to be certain guys that it's just not going to work for, and they're not going to use it. So, those guys will have to decide who they are and if they want to do that or not, and that's going to be their choice. But the fact that they can get their hands on these bats and they're going to be accessible to them, I don't think is going to give any team an unfair advantage at this point.
Okay, let's pivot quickly here. I do want to talk a little bit about what we've seen over the first handful of games, and I'm always really careful, right, not to jump to any conclusions because it's such a small sample.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Marsh, I throw out that first game, opening day against Mackenzie Gore, the shadows being what they were. Nobody could see anything. Brandon Marsh has a couple of hits against lefties over the last few games. We've talked about this, it seems like, for a few years with him, like getting a chance to play more against left-handed pitching to see, whether he can be an everyday guy and, being at the point in his career where maybe it's the time to find that out. What are you seeing from him so far? Or what did you even in spring training see from him? Because I know he got a lot of same side at bats in spring. Is there anything that's sustainable that you're seeing that could be sustainable over a larger period of time?
Yeah, and I think what you want to look at there, Scott, is go back into spring training where he faced McClannon, he faced Rondon, he faced Crochet, he faced Skubal. So those are four of probably the best lefties that you're going to get to face. And by design, Rob Thompson put him in the lineup and said, let's challenge him. Let's see where he's at. Not only did he answer the bell on those guys, but every lefty that came up, he put together great at-bats against. And yes, I was a little concerned after the Gore game. I said, man, he'd just been doing so good. And it was kind of a clunker, but it was a clunker for a lot of reasons. And I think you said it best when you said the shadows were tough. And I mean, there was 20 strikeouts between the two teams after 5 innings. So after that point, I think we had more walks than strikeouts. And we really swung the bats well. So I'm excited for what this season has in store for Brandon Marsh. He just puts together really, really, really tough at bats. His strike zone discipline is incredible. He rarely chases against lefties, against righties, whoever it is. And I think that stability at the back end of our lineup is something that we're looking for. Somebody that can grind out an at bat, get on base. I think it helps. And if him and Stott down at the bottom of our lineup can get on for the top of our order, it makes our lineup that much better.
Along those lines, you guys faced lefty starter more often than any team in baseball last year, 50-something games against lefty starters. You did rather well against them. I sort of submit that was a lot of that was that Kyle Schwarber hit 300 against lefties last year, and Bryce hits lefties the same, just as well as anything else. But you're probably going to face a ton of lefties again because you look at the bottom half of your order in particular, and on a lot of days, right, you might have Kepler, Stott, and Marsh, 3 of your bottom 4 hitters, or maybe 3 of your bottom 5 are left-handed. What gives you confidence that, because over the years, like Max has had years where he's hit lefties and years where he struggled against lefties. Stott, I thought, did really well against lefties his first couple of years. He struggled last year, but he struggled a lot in a lot of situations last year because of the injury and whatnot. What gives you confidence that you guys aren't going to be susceptible to lefties, especially in the bottom part of your order?
I just think that everybody's improved. I think Marsh has worked really hard on his craft and really hard on getting comfortable against lefties. As Schwarber, don't forget, Schwarber was a 170 hitter against lefties in his lifetime, and he worked really hard. And now he's putting together these at bats against lefties, righties. It doesn't matter. Bryce Harper has shown that he can handle lefties. If Stott has done it in the past, he's been able to hit lefties. Kepler has been able to hit lefties. Are they a better option than a righty? It could be. I think Johan Rojas has improved a great deal. Stott seems to be healthy and in a good spot there. Max Kepler has made some changes to his swing, giving himself a better opportunity to succeed. And he's healthy. He had a core injury that, can be really tough to battle through. So I just feel like our guys have improved a great deal. They've helped themselves out with some mechanical changes, and I've seen enough that leads me to believe that we're going to be all right against left-handed pitching, especially those guys. Not so much the Schwarbers and the Harpers, but can the Keplers, the Stotts, and the Marshes, can they put together quality at bats? What helps those guys more than somebody else? It's their strike zone discipline. They don't chase, they stay in the zone, and they put together these long, exhausting almost at bats. And those are things that our lineup needs, and we're starting to see that.
Yeah, Bryson said to me recently that, like, you know, I asked him like what he sees his identity as a hitter, and he said, I want to be annoying to the pitcher, you know, and that kind of describes it perfectly, because that's how he was in 2022 and 23. I thought he was perfectly annoying, you know, and it was not an easy at bat when he went up there. You know, foul off a bunch of pitches, and we know how good a 2-strike hitter he was. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, and just kind of putting together good at-bats and quality at-bats and having it trickle down. Let me get you out of here on this. I think everyone who covers baseball, and the Phillies in particular, is like obligated to ask about the batting order, specifically the top of the batting order. My contention has been, as long as you don't, lose your mind and suddenly flip the order and Bryce is hitting 9th and Schwarber's hitting 8th, like the actual order at the top, to me, does not matter a whole lot in terms of like how many runs you're going to score over the course of a season. Where do you fall on that? You know, whether it's Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Bohm, whether it's Turner, Harper, Bohm, Schwarber. I mean, whatever order you guys use, as long as the guys are hitting in the right part of the order, and maybe the pocket of the order fits, right? So that one guy leading into the next guy, leading into the next guy, and less about the individual. How do you feel about, do we make too much of who's batting leadoff on any given day?
Well, let's look at it this way. Of all our guys in our order, who probably has been the most consistent guy the last 3 or 4 years? He's hit 40 home runs. He's scored 100 runs. He's driven in 100. There was a stat that only 3 guys had done something that he'd done, and it was like Pujols, him, and somebody else. So
yeah, it was home run leaders, but then there was I know what you're talking about. I remember seeing
that. So you're talking about our top guy in our order, and we're making a big stink out of him moving. We got to be careful on how we look at this. And do I feel comfortable with Trey Turner leading off? Yes. Would I feel comfortable with Bryce Harper leading off? Yes. Why? Because they're very good hitters. If it's something that helps Trey kind of get his strike zone back, then I'm all for it. And Kyle is accepting of a different role, but he also understands the value of him leading off, and so do we. And I think right now Rob Thompson's kind of said, okay, I'll give you both a chance at this. So Trey will lead off against against lefties, and Kyle will lead off against righties. That was the initial plan, and we'll kind of take it from there. But I think our first 4 guys in our order are unbelievable. I mean, you can throw them in there however you want, but you're talking about Bohm, Harper, Trey, and Schwarber. I mean, however you want to do it is fine with me. But I like the fact that both guys are going to get a chance to lead off. Is too much made of it? Probably a little bit too much. I mean, one thing I want to be careful of is moving Schwarber, too far down where he's an on-base guy. That's what he does. He walks over 100 times. He's going to be on base. You want those type of guys to be up more often than not. So we'll see how this plays out. But as it stands right now, we're going to give both Schwarber and Turner an opportunity to lead off, and we'll kind of see how it plays out.
So I have to tell you, I have an 8-year-old son. He had his first Little League game of the season last night. I knew you and I were going to be talking this morning, and I said, boy, I talk to Kevin Long all the time, and I've never asked him about like what his advice is for an 8-year-old who's trying to hit. You've already given us a lot of time this morning, so maybe we can table that conversation, and that's a podcast for another day, like your advice for youth hitters. Because honestly, like, I think about this a lot. Like, gosh, I mean, like you and I talk about these gifted hitters all the time. I have never once asked you about like what your advice is for a kid. But let's put a pin in that. Let's table it. And let's say we'll talk about it another day because you're always generous with your time, and I appreciate you allowing us to steal a few minutes this morning. Usually we do this in a corner of the dugout after batting practice, but I'm really appreciative of you sharing some time with us today on Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks again for being here.
You got it, Scott. I'm glad I could join you.
I want to thank Kevin Long again for being with us. For our Reporter's Notebook segment, I'm solo this week, so let's quickly touch on a few things from the first week of games. First, just when you think Zach Wheeler couldn't be any more impressive, he gives up 1 run on 2 hits in 6 innings on opening day in Washington, and 1 run on 3 hits in 7 innings in the rain and cold against the Rockies at home. Going back to last year, he's now made 13 consecutive starts of at least 6 innings and no more than 2 runs allowed. That's the longest streak of that kind in Phillies history, eclipsing Dutch Leonard's 12-game run in 1947. Wheeler is also the 19th pitcher ever with a streak of that length. The list includes Hall of Famers Tom Seaver, Gaylord Perry, Don Drysdale, Randy Johnson, and Greg Maddux. Some others who've done it: Felix Hernandez, Dwight Gooden, Louis Tiant, Mike Scott, Adam Wainwright, and our old friend Jake Arrieta. I mentioned it to Aaron Nola the other night, and here's what he said. Quote, "Seeing him all these years now, it's just kind of what he does. It's almost like a nonchalant, okay, here's 6 innings at least. But that's what he does, man. He commands the ball. Even when sometimes he doesn't have the velocity, the ball just moves even better. It's almost like 2 or 3 different pitchers in one, which is lethal." I've said it before on this show, and I'll say it again. If I have to pick one pitcher, one active pitcher to start one game, I'm going with Zach Wheeler. Next up, I think Edmundo Sosa could start at shortstop for some teams in the majors, although I suspect his weaknesses as a hitter would get exposed with too much playing time. But here's what we know for sure. It's impossible for a bench player to accept his role any better than Sosa does with the Phillies. He played well for 6 weeks last year while Trey Turner was out with a hamstring strain, and he's been terrific so far this season while getting a little bit more playing time than expected because Turner missed a few games with back spasms. It's a testament to how Sosa manages to stay ready to play whenever he's needed. He has willingly tried to learn the outfield over the last couple of years and might eventually get some time in left field against left-handed pitching this year. And whenever he plays, he brings an energy and a vitality to the lineup. Wheeler, who's not one to blow smoke, called Sosa, quote, "one of my favorite players to watch in the big leagues." That's high praise, and it's echoed in all corners of the Phillies clubhouse. Lastly, more than a few eyebrows were raised in the offseason back in December when the Phillies signed Max Kepler. The fit wasn't obvious, right? Kepler is a left-handed hitter. He hit 20 or more home runs only once in the last 4 seasons with the Twins. But he had a really strong spring training, and he's off to a good start. And not for nothing, he hit his first Phillies homer in the home opener on March 31st, which is the same day that Braves left fielder Jurickson Profar got suspended 80 games after testing positive for a banned performance-enhancing drug. Before Atlanta signed Profar to a 3-year, $42 million contract, a lot of people, myself included, noted that he had the plate discipline and contact skills that the Phillies seemed to be lacking or needing in their lineup. But Profar was also coming off the best season by far of his career with the Padres. And now maybe we know why. His suspension is going to cost him only half the season, but he's ineligible for the postseason, assuming the Braves get there. Phillies, of course, will get their first look at the Braves coming up on Monday when they go, or on Tuesday, when they go to Atlanta. All right, let's move on to our last segment. We call this Hit and Run, where we take a question from a reader or a listener. You can submit a question by email or to any of my social media accounts, which you see listed right here. This week's question comes via email from John Reardon, I think I'm saying that right, who writes, "Hi, Scott. Have the Phillies considered playing both Sosa and Turner at the same time? Sosa at short and Turner in center." John, thanks for the question. The Phillies have considered a lineup that includes both Sosa and Turner, but not the way that you're suggesting. They actually had them both in the lineup Wednesday night with Sosa at second base and Bryson Stott on the bench against a lefty, in this case, Rockies lefty Kyle Freeland. Now, Stott's going to play against most lefties, so that's not so Sosa at second is not a really likely alignment. They've talked about using Sosa in left field, as I said, against lefties, which would enable them to give Kepler a day off here or there. But there hasn't been any discussion, not yet at least, of moving Turner off shortstop. It's something that will come up eventually because Turner is signed for 11 years, and he's now in year 3. But he's only going to be 32 in June, and the Phillies are hoping that he can play another few years at short and give them at least average defense before considering any position switch. All right, let's stop it there. Quick programming note. Every episode of Phillies Extra is available on the Inquirer's YouTube channel or by clicking the Phillies tab on Inquirer.com. We've had some really great guests from Cole Hamels and JT Realmuto to Kyle Schwarber and Bryson Stott, several others. If you've missed any of our interviews, please give those a listen. That'll do it for this week. Thanks again to my guest, Phillies hitting coach Kevin Long, and to our producer, Angelica Irizarry, for making sure everything looks and sounds great every single week. Until next week, I'm Scott Lauber. Thanks to everyone for listening, watching, and of course for reading the Philadelphia Inquirer.